Medieval and Romanesque art.
Medieval art. Spanning more than 1,000 years, various art movements and materials used, the growth of regional art, and many different art styles, medieval art can be challenging to categorize. Part of the diversity in art during the medieval period is likely due to the political and social upheavals that many parts of the Western world experienced. For example, the Black Death or bubonic plague wiped out about a third of the population in Europe during the Middle Ages. There was also a change in people's relationship to art. At the start of the medieval period, most of the artwork in Europe was produced for religious institutions, churches and monasteries, or for a few societal elites. By the end of the medieval period in Europe, many towns had locally produced art. Artwork could be found in the homes of those in the middle classes, and there was a growing general interest in art. Romanesque art. Romanesque art includes art produced from around 1000 CE to the 13th century in Europe. The term was first used to refer to the architecture of this period, which drew heavily on Roman architecture such as apse, barrel vaults, and leaf decorations. This period of history was marked by a growing religious practice in Europe, which included pilgrimages to sacred sites. Trade routes in the Mediterranean were also opened again, which brought both an infusion of ideas as well as a growth in a middle class made up of merchants and artisans. In addition to the connections to Roman art, the art of the Romanesque period is characterized by bright colors, although these colors have often faded today. Many of the compositions show little depth, partly because the art was often intended for particular spaces in churches and other buildings. When backgrounds are attempted, they are often more abstract than realistic. Textiles and metalworks were also produced, often for religious purposes. These works of art include chalices, decorative crosses, and reliquaries.
Chalice. Decorative chalices elevated the everyday act of drinking. Cross. Crosses were much more than symbols of faith. Rather, they became decorative centerpieces. Reliquary. A reliquary held precious relics or encased the physical remains or clothing of saints for worship.
One of the developments in the Romanesque period is pictorial stained glass. This was the first period in history where stained glass became widely used, and it offers the first examples of artists creating an image or scene with the stained glass. Fragments for pictorial stained glass have been found dating to the 10th century. The earliest intact examples of pictorial stained glass are from the 11th century, including 5 windows showing prophets at Augsburg Cathedral in Germany. Other examples exist from the 12th and 13th centuries, such as those depicting the crucifixion and ascension of Christ. Sadly, many of these early examples of stained glass have been broken, destroyed, or reused. Historians have found that some of the glass from the Romanesque period were reused in the stained glass created during the Gothic period. Sculpture also reappeared in the Romanesque period in a big way. Stone sculpture had languished in Europe since the works of the ancient societies. Freestanding sculptures, for example, were largely absent from the artwork produced after the 5th century. Some stone relief was still produced, generally as ornaments for architecture. During the Romanesque period, prompted by the spread and fervor of religion at the time. In addition, metalwork sculpture increased, often drawing inspiration from manuscript illustrations to create intricate and detailed patterns. Romanesque sculpture took a page from ancient Roman art by returning to the practice of using monumental sculpture in architecture. Church facades, capitals, doorways, and other architectural pieces were often covered with sculpture. In addition, sculpture was often used to decorate the items used within the church, such as the Gloucester candlestick and items like baptismal fonts. Most Romanesque sculpture is religious in nature, either in its use or subject matter. Scenes such as creation, the Nativity, and other episodes from the Old and New Testament were common. The topic of the Last Judgment, the final judgment of God on humans, was also often used. This theme was used to help convince believers to repent. The inclusion of the cross in sculptures was meant to be a reminder of the believer's redemption and salvation. However, Romanesque art wasn't all pleasant. In fact, some of it seems like a prequel to today's horror movies. Dragons, monsters, and demons take shape on some sculptural pieces. Other pieces show people being punished for engaging in one of the 7 deadly sins of the Bible.